As Bob said, I want to give my regrets. I feel really bad about having to cancel out on you guys, but being producers, you probably understand Mother Nature, and we're up against November, mid-November, and so we're taking advantage of the days that we have here. Those of you that know me might think it's a blessing that I'm not there too, so just ask Bob about that. So, but you're going to be in good hands with Morgan and Bob, and they're going to give you some really good information and help you with some working time and so forth. And so that I can play my role, I am going to offer up that after you're done here and you go home and you're noodling around on things, or you have questions or something, please let me know, and we can schedule an hour or two or whatever and sit down or Zoom or whatever. And I'll try to work with you to help you through your thinking after you've had a chance to digest things here a little bit. So with that, or anytime, please feel free to holler at us. For those of you that don't know the Value Added Ag Center, we are a nonprofit that's been working with ag projects since 1999. And what we do is we provide technical assistance and resources and education for expanding and startup ag businesses. So we have that focus in the ag area. And we were formed by a group of ag associations and ag-related associations that saw that there wasn't a place for producers to go and for help with their business development and expansion. So we are the one-stop hub for you to come to. We hold your hand as we put it through all of the phases of development, help you with writing, help you with finding resources and so forth, and then set you up for being able to use our partners' resources, which is like Bob at the SBDC, getting loans, getting grants, and things like that from other economic development related entities on the state, federal, and local level. So we help with managing the overall project, feasibility assessment, business planning, putting together funding packages, and administering them, and then education, outreach, and things like that. So again, just kind of take you through the whole gamut of putting your business together or expanding it. So I think that I'll give you a quick introduction so you can get on your day. But again, I want to welcome you to please, and my contact information is in things. Please feel free to holler anytime that we can give you a hand.
For those of you that do not know me or I have not introduced myself to, I am Bob Wyrick. I am with the Small Business Development Centers, based right outside of Pierre here. And my office is just like 4 blocks away, so I'm not very far away from home. I have worked in this area for probably 22 or 23 years, right? I went to work right before 9/11, so that kind of dates me, for South Dakota Department of Agriculture. I was an ag development specialist, and for 10 years I sat in a desk up here and answered questions about, like, well, we're thinking about doing jerky, or we're thinking about doing hydroponic tomatoes, or we want to do salsa or strawberries or whatever. So I answered a lot of those questions, and some of them were kind of out here, and some of them became mainstream. You know, over the years, people used to call me, and it's like, okay, I haven't dealt with that one. You know, I've dealt with vermiculture and mint growing and all sorts of other things, but certainly I have become resourceful in like knowing who to talk to, right? Generally. But I've also found out that too, that you know, doing this is that I was kind of the resource that was kind of the jack of all trades and master of none. But I found out that in doing this is that I had certain skill sets that were probably being underutilized, except for I was a good hub of information, right? And I knew a lot of people. I've seen a lot of people. I recognize a lot of faces here. I've done a lot of things. I've been in agriculture production. I've taught production agriculture. I have worked in international marketing. I have done. I've made wine, right? Sold high-tech electronics, which you wouldn't be able to tell by my experiences here this morning. Yeah. Yeah, what was there? Usually I had people that would help me out. Like I was a salesman, right? And about 4 years ago, I went to work for Small Business Development Center. Small business development centers across the United States, but mine in particular, we have a lot of latitude about what we do. We do utilize, and I think you may have, we'll see it today here, is our business planning guide, right? So at least everybody here in South Dakota has that. If not, we'll get it to you and we'll bring it up here. The business planning guide is about a 22-page reference volume. And it is a lot of the stuff you want to know, the questions that you will ask about starting, developing, transitioning, or segueing a business to where you want it to be. And I expect almost everybody in here is, it's like, well, they're either thinking about this, they're doing it, or they're doing something else and they want to augment that or transition that. And that's what I'm here for. There aren't any projects too big, too small. I will tell you that I am funded by the state of South Dakota. So probably everybody in this room, when you pay your taxes, you're paying a little bit of my salary, and I am funded by Small Business Administration out of DC. So both the federal and the state folks. So our goal is to promote small businesses in South Dakota, right? And across the United States, we do it all the way across the United States, right? So one of the things that we do, and in my particular case, because I have some of the background like I talked about, but I have the financial background. We have a spreadsheet that's, and I don't know how many of you are used to doing spreadsheets, but 43 pages of spreadsheet, and it's all integral. In other words, if I change something here, it changes it here, 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 and here. Okay. It is proprietary, so I don't ever share that. I will share the results with any of the clients, and the information comes from you. So when I share it, I put it in a PDF, or I just convert it to a PDF, and you can view that on your computer, even on your phone, I guess, if you wanted to, or you can print it out and get out your magnifying glasses and look at it that way. But we look at things from the very beginning that we will address today, the sources and uses. That's in our business planning guide. So if you're thinking about doing something, how much money do you think it'll be? Right? And the second part of that is, where is that going to come from? Right? Now, if you are just starting out, like, well, or if you have bigger dreams, like, well, am I looking for a grant? Am I looking for a lender that will do this? Certainly that's our intent. When we finish our financial package, we call it, when we finish it, we call it lender ready. So the lender ready portion of it is, if you went into into a lender, a banker or whatever, or you're looking at applying for a grant. And hopefully, even if you're maybe looking at putting up a NRCS high tunnel, you're saying, well, how do I pay for this? Or is this a good decision? Well, now with the NRCS high tunnel program, well, that's become kind of secondary, right? But I think it's still there. I hope to think that everybody that's doing this is looking at this from the financial standpoint. Even if it's your hobby, even if you're not borrowing money or getting grants for doing this, I want to know, it's like, I want you to know how much money, how much of your resources are you investing in this project? And a lot of that is, it's like, well, that's kind of tough, because it's like, well, are you a hobby farm, right? Well, I know personal experience, I used to have a 4,000 acre hobby farm, and I call it that because it was 4,000 acres. I had lots of cows and small grains and hay and all sorts of stuff, but I didn't make enough money, right? It was like, wasn't providing me the income that I probably should have had. If I was working 3,000 hours a year on there, it's like, well, I should be making at least, $15 an hour. It's like, no, that wasn't the case, right? So had to have job off the farm, didn't get any benefits, so my wife had to work and she had benefit anyway. So needless to say, that's where we're going today. So at least if you are breaking open the piggy bank, you're getting if you have your eyes set on a grant, or if you're going to a lender and saying, well, what can we do? Will you loan us money to do this? This is going to be a big undertaking. Or are you going to grow this organically? However, but we will say, it's like, how can we do this? And I would generally make the assumption that most of you aren't doing this as the only thing you're doing. You're thinking about maybe augmenting something else. And that may not be. But if it is, okay, so we're doing this, but we want to do this, or we want to kind of move this, or we want to jump from here all the way over to here. Either way, that's what I do, right? I have clients that come in on a daily basis that will say, well, I'm working for, here in Pierre, right? I'm working for the state of South Dakota, and I want to open my own business for doing this. Most people, and I think probably at least a few of you that I see faces in here, have maybe never started a business, or maybe it's been a once or twice type deal, or maybe you've started a business, but it's been an entirely different. Maybe you sold shirts at a retail, right? Maybe you had a restaurant, maybe, but there are a lot of very common principles to every one of those. And a lot of this is how much money we're gonna need, and then what does our income look like over the next 2, 3, 5 years, so that we can say we're getting a return on that. Sometimes return is to pay back the lender. Other times it's return to say, well, okay, I'm getting a $10,000 or $15,000 grant. Does this make sense? Or does this only make sense if I get the grant? Or if I'm growing organically, should I just keep that money in the bank and earn what, 4.9% CD right now? If that's the case, then let's do that. Let's see how this all works. The financial package that I put together will minimally include Generally the sources and uses, which we'll talk about, and you'll have examples of it later today. Income statement. And you will try to put together probably a monthly income statement. Okay. I do them for 3 years. So for 36 months, the income statement, the cash flow statement, and the balance sheet. And all three are a little bit different. And that's in that big spreadsheet package that I use. So it's like if we have a loan or whatever, and I'll show it to you here in a moment. But that's what we have to look at. And then we can start looking at things like your debt coverage ratio. In other words, if you're going to a bank, do you have good enough income to pay off your loan, right? That's a portion of it. If it's going to a if it's maybe part of a grant application, then we'll say, okay, this makes sense because I've run grant programs, I've been a part of grant programs, and one of the things they look at is sustainability, right? Sustainability and your ability to continue that project past the grant, right? So it's a 3-year grant. Oh, well, 3 years. Oh, well, that was nice. We learned a lot, and now we're going to go home, right? That isn't, I don't think, the intent of most grants that are out there. It's like, get the grant, if you can get some assistance, go ahead and go with that. Sherry's an excellent grant writer. She writes a lot of grants. I don't know if I should have said that or not, but she does a lot of grants, and has done them over a number of years. But if we look at businesses, whether it's now the big one is meat processing, that's from USDA. Those are a lot of grants out there. Specialty crops, there's stuff out there for specialty crop production, local foods, urban agriculture, those types of things. I will tell you, and this is just kind of a disclaimer, if you come to my office, I don't know about my other colleagues, but if you come to my office and say, well, what kind of grant can I get for doing this project? I will say, you come to me, you find the grant and you come to me, because I don't know what you're trying to do, right? I don't know what you're willing to sacrifice or what you're willing to put forward. I don't know what your resources are. How much money do you have in the bank? How committed you are to this? Is this just a $4,000 project, or is this a $400,000 project, or a $4 million project, right? And with that being said, it's like, okay, well, we want to find out why you want to do this, and does it make sense? And all those things we can look at. Some of the financial ratios, everything, if anybody has a finance background, we look at everything from current ratios and debt to equity ratios and those types of things. And we can compare those to the industry as well, too. So that's part of what we do. That's pretty deep. That's way beyond this. In order for me to do that, one of the big things I want you to have, and that's why we're here today, is to do a business plan, right? And so many people go to a bank and say, I want some money. Can you give me a loan? Well, okay. Can you show me some financials? Can you tell me what you're going to do? Well, maybe they sit there for a half an hour or an hour and they tell me what they're going to do, or they tell a lender what they're going to do. That's what a business plan is about. You're telling a lender, you're telling your spouse, you're telling a grant reviewer how you're going to run this operation, how you're going to make money at it, how much money you're going to make at it, how much it's going to cost, all these different kinds of things. And it can either be a living document. In other words, you can every 6 months, every 6 days, I guess, if you wanted to, every 6 years, you can dust it off and well, we thought that 3 years ago, but now it's not even close. So we tried that. It's well, that was the dumbest thing we ever did. Or maybe it's doing really well and our revenues are way up here and we thought they'd maybe be here. Well, that's good. So maybe we need to do more of that, or maybe we can do something that's analogous or similar to that and say, okay, we did that with this, so let's do something that's like that right here. And then let's do something that's maybe up here too. We have that ability to do that. The business plan is your narrative behind the numbers. And a lot of people do business plans and they'll say, okay, here's the business plan. And I see a lot of business plans. Before they even get to my office, they have found some resource, they've used something online. That's a great start. But they will, a lot of times business plans are, there's a lot of inclusion of things that are, it's more emotional statements, right? As opposed to anything and subjective in nature. Those things will be, it's I'm going to do this because people are eating more food. And we're having, COVID showed us that we weren't able to get food from our local grocery store. I want to be able to have fresh tomatoes or local beef or whatever. I want numbers. So when we talk about this from that perspective, it's can I do this in this current marketplace? And we're going to start drilling down to some of those things. It's well, can I do this, right? Can I do this? What supports that, what I'm saying? What supports the fact it's okay, can I sell tomatoes at $10 a pound? Probably not. If I put in my expectations that I'm going to sell tomatoes for $3 a pound, oh, well, maybe, maybe $3 a pound in February, and they're grand and glorious and heritage tomatoes and all this stuff. And we have them at a couple select locations, or we take them to the restaurants and we sell them for whatever. And it's they buy a lot of tomatoes from us, right? Same way too with, I talked that I used to make wine, right? Used to be at Prairie Berry up at Hill City. And I remember it was boy, it'd be great to have some vinifera versions, which we always did. I always thought it was great vinifera versions are things like Chardonnay and Cabernet Sauvignon and Merlot and Pinot Noir, right? So I thought, well, that'd be great. But guess what? There are thousands, at that time, about 6,000 wineries across the United States that were doing the same thing. And guess what? They had the grapes growing right outside their back door. So do you think we could compete with that, even though we were producing great product? And we had really good winemakers. We had a couple of California winemakers. Sandy is great. She does an excellent job up there. She has a good taste for all the different types of wine she makes. But I remember one time I was out in the Willamette Valley in Oregon, and I got really excited about Pinot Noir. And I love Pinot Noir wine, right? So Pinot Noir, one of those great grapes, and it's really really fairly hot right now. My wife likes it. It's one of the few drier reds that she'll drink. And I said, let's buy some Pinot Noir grapes and make Pinot Noir. And the winemakers both said, probably not a good thing, because the grapes are real expensive and the process is really resource consuming. And by the time you get done, you're going to have a $35 bottle of wine. Oh,
Retail or wholesale?
retail, right? And I thought, I think here in South Dakota, we don't have a lot of options to sell a $35 retail bottle of wine. There's some being sold, if you have a big name, but a lot of the stuff is, below 20, below 30 for sure. And you go and you pick up, $12 bottle of wine, you think that's pretty good. Oh, these are really good friends. I'll pick up a $22 bottle of wine. So that's kind of where we're at, but a $35 bottle of wine. So we never made Pinot Noir. I had some great grapes all lined up and figured out how to do it and all that kind of stuff. That was my job. Anyway, so do you do that, right? We had the conversation, just who was it this morning with the person down in Nebraska that's doing citrus in the greenhouse, right? Citrus in the snow, right? Buried the greenhouse, gets the geothermal warmth, and he grows citrus in the greenhouse. It's kind of like growing bananas in South Dakota. You can do it, right? I'm sure that somebody will show you how to do that. We can do a lot of things with high tunnels, and that's become one of my things about. It's like, well, we can do it, but does it make any sense from a financial standpoint to do that, right? How many pounds of tomatoes are we going to get? And what's the risk? How, maybe we're going to get a substantial boost from the NRCS high tunnel program, the EQIP program. And maybe that's going to help us a lot. But at some point in time, we have to say, okay, 5 years comes down, the high tunnel has served its purpose. Do we continue doing that? Yeah, we do, because it makes us good money. But you have to remember too, with high tunnels, it's like you're competing against those people who are growing it out in the garden without a high tunnel. They don't have a $10,000 high tunnel or a $4,000 high tunnel or a $30,000 high tunnel. They're growing it out in the garden, and they might not catch that first month of market like you can, or they might not catch the last 2 months of the market like the people out in the garden can do. But they don't have all the expense involved, right? And it's like if the snowstorm comes in May and wipes out all their, caves in the high tunnel and everything goes bad. Yeah, that's a lot of stress, so
is hail.
So is hail, wind, snowstorm. This is a little bit of a recap of what we did for those of you that are following the schedule. Our business planning guide, which I think you all have access to on the Google Drive. All the small business development centers across South Dakota. Kelly, Mark, Donna, Linda isn't here anymore. She retired, but she was been here for years and years, right?
Where is that located?
Belinda is in Watertown.
No, the document, yes.
And the Google Drive, and we can get it to you
Okay.
if we need to be as well too. We'll be accessing portions of that as well too. I kept saying, well, we're going to be talking about some other things later on if you're purchasing or selling a business, right? It's like, but this is really good stuff for you to kind of know. The reason why, is because it's the practical considerations of what you do as a business person. You know, you're not working for somebody else anymore. You know, why are you buying the business, right? It's like, is it to make money? Is it to do gluten free, you know, whatever, you know, and there's so many elements in that. You're gonna have accounts receivable, accounts payable. I do want to catch a bunch of this. It is pretty much self-explanatory. But we talked about it just a little bit before. So what are the agencies that you need to talk to? And why? And business entity is one of the first ones. It's a logical thing that people look at business entity from the very first thing you do. Think of your operation as equity. Maybe you have equity or maybe you don't. And it's here, right? It's maybe the house, maybe it's a farmstead, maybe it's the whole farm and ranch. We might want to put a partition between that, as many people do, to say, if something goes wrong here, I don't want somebody to claim that this portion harmed me, right? I want that partition to kind of keep me separate. That's why we form LLCs. Pretty common here in South Dakota, pretty common across the United States in businesses as practice. We start talking about it down here. Talk to also an attorney or a tax person about what's the best business entity for you. But I will say to have an LLC is really important. I really like LLCs, and maybe to even have multiple LLCs. I will tell a lot of people, it's like, okay, if you're a restaurant, you have an LLC that owns the restaurant, the parking lot, the building, the equipment and all that stuff. And then you have an operating entity and you have that partition, that LLC in between there, so that if maybe you don't do anything wrong, somebody claims that the chicken salad that you fed them yesterday made them sick and put them in the hospital, and now there's a $30,000 bill at the hospital, and they're going to hold you responsible for it. Well, they can say the operating company might have been at fault for that, but maybe not the building people, right? So that partition helps keep us separate. Keep losing miles here. And realize that you can be an LLC either as a sole proprietor, a partnership, or a corporation. Any one of those can be an LLC, right? So again, if it's even just a partnership, you and a significant other, very good. You can do that all by going to the Secretary of State's office, $150 to form an LLC. You can do it yourself. You can have an attorney or a registered agent do that. We'll talk about that briefly. Going to the IRS and getting a employee ID tax number. They call them EINs, but they can be synonymous with taxpayer identification numbers. And basically, so you don't have to use your social security number on your tax returns, right? So you're not putting that information out there. It's locked up, so to speak. You can do that. If you are an employer or you ever expect to have employees in your operation, including your family now, family members need to be considered employees, right? Other than the owners, like if you're a partnership, if it's a husband-wife team, they're the owners, right? But if you hire children, if you hire your brother Joe, your niece Sally, they're employees, and the reason for that, and they need to be treated as employees, we learned during COVID that they also should qualify for unemployment, right? So if they were just, oh yeah, it's just part of our family deal, it's like, well, yeah, I've been working for dad for 18 years, right? And it's like, we've been running cows, like, you're not an employee. You don't get anything. So they really kind of took it, but anyway, we have changed that pretty dramatically. If you're thinking about doing, sorry. I say to do that, to get your LLC, to get your business name, to do a DBA, a doing business as, so it might be ABC company doing business as, Wonderful Tomatoes or whatever. You can put whatever fictitious or fanciful name that you want to there. That's like a $10 registration fee, even if you're a sole proprietorship. In South Dakota, if your last name is included in the business name, you don't have to be registered at all for anything, right? Except for, well, you still have to pay taxes and all that kind of stuff, but you don't need to be registered with the Secretary of State's office. If your last name isn't included, then you have to have a fanciful name, or you need to be an LLC, right? Sales tax. Most everybody in South Dakota, when you sell things, you need to charge sales tax. If you're doing things as a contractor, you need to be a contractor, have a contractor's excise tax and pay taxes on those things that you do, right? For the most part. Talk to Department of Revenue about all the little things there that we don't necessarily know the rules for. They're the experts. State excise taxes, winery. You pay excise tax on every gallon of production. You know that?
Yeah,
91 cents, I think it's still 91 cents per gallon. And then you pay sales tax on it. If you sell a bottle of wine, you pay sales tax on that on top of that as well too.
We haven't sold any wine yet, but we technically have a winery by South Dakota law because we make wine in our basement.
Yes, and if you
Yep.
make even 200 gallons of it or 20 gallons of it, you have to report it, you have to pay tax on it. When you pitch the yeast, so this is when you pitch the yeast, when you put yeast into fruit, you made wine. Whether it turns out or can't drink it or.
And I guess that doesn't have to be grapes.
Yeah, it can be rhubarb. Rhubarb,
Me,
pumpkins, mead, it can be honey, right? I heard somebody knocking. That was me. Oh, okay. Percussive. Did you have a question? No, sir. Okay. Lots of other operating licenses. And I hate to say it, but there's a lot of different agencies within the state mostly. You might even have local or city ordinances as well too. Sometimes certain municipalities have a health license, right? If you live on the reservation, you may need to have a tribal license to do business on the reservation. It gets kind of complex on reservations because sometimes it's like, well, I have a tribal license, why do I need all this other stuff? I'm on the reservation, I'm on the property, whatever. Yeah, but just the same way too, here, if we're renting property, the water that we use, the air we emit into, all become public in the public domain, right? So if I'm running sewer down the creek, that's probably going to impact somebody else. And that's why DANR or OSHA steps in there. Occupational licenses, Department of, pardon me, Revenue. Okay. Gonna try to get rid of this. Sorry about that. Department of Health. Anybody that's selling products, farmers market, there's certain things that you can and can't do. If you have a lodge, I heard, bed and breakfast, VRBOs, those type of things. They have some specific regulations that you need to, it's like, how big your windows are, right? How big your windows are, right? It's like, yeah, it's about the fire codes, right? About how you can egress from that structure if it goes on fire. Agriculture related businesses, nurseries, egg sellers. Do you have a candlers and a grader's license, right? A nursery, so if you're selling nursery plants, those are all licensed under Department of Ag and Natural Resources, right? Public safety, you sell things by the pound. Scales, certified scales, right? Okay. Department of Transportation, Department, you know, if you're transporting commercially, if you're saying, well, I'm gonna transport for several other people. If you want wildlife fences built up around your garden so the deer or the elk don't come in there and eat all your goodies. Yeah,
So what with that, then you need,
they have a program out there that can say, well, we'll come along and build a fence for you.
oh, really?
Yeah, you didn't know that, did you? So they're kind of
So that's
positive.
where the Department of what?
Department, Game Fish and Parks, right?
Oh.
Yep.
Then you probably have to. Something in return, I assume, but.
Generally that you get approved, and there's only so much money. And I said, well, I have a whole quarter section of organic hay. And it's like, well, like,
And they keep out rabbits.
how does that work, right? As a business, you also need to, you know, federal payroll taxes, FICA, those types of things, as you have employees, or if you're doing self-employment tax, your CPA may know that, right? And you're going like, well, this is not about business plans, right?
Mhm.
This is a part of your business plans to say, I've already talked to these people. Here's my LLC registration. Here's what my business is going to be called. OSHA. Most people here probably don't come under OSHA because they have a threshold. But believe me, if something goes wrong, especially if you have an employee, they're going to show up at your place, right? If that employee was disgruntled or whatever, yeah, they're going to show up and they're going to say, oh, you weren't being safe. You weren't doing this right. Same way to with the federal, we won't see the feds a lot.
Only scan this section.
We won't see the feds a lot. FDA, Food and Drug Administration, where do you think they might come in? Does Michelle? Yep. Do acidified foods, those
Start
types of things
magnifier.
that we're putting in a glass or selling retail or whatever, in a jar, in a package. Generally, FDA doesn't come in there until you start going across state lines, or unless it's you know, maybe it's a particular risky item, right? And USDA and Animal Industry Board, when it comes to meat of almost every kind, labor laws, there's all sorts of people that you can talk to. Like I said, there are a whole bunch of things that you need to talk. This is kind of your checklist. Yep. Oh, I don't need those people. And don't assume always, don't assume that, oh, they don't have anything to do with me. Well, maybe they do, right? It's like Department of Public Safety. Oh, yeah, I have a custom harvester, I drive a combine, whatever. Or I need a scale to weigh out my tea that I sell, right? Or my baking mix.
You know, I used to have a mail forwarding business and I had clients that worked on the road. They're like, oh, I don't have to pay sales tax. And I'd always say, well, maybe you do, maybe you don't. But you get
Okay,
exempted
right.
by the state. You don't just get to exempt yourself.
Yeah, you don't get it to say, oh, I don't have to pay taxes, that's not me, right?
Right, yeah, they're kind of like, I can't? I'm like, no, you don't get to exempt yourself.
Property taxes, one of the things I am gonna tell you, most people know about property taxes. And I hope that you put that into your business plan. It's like, well, are your property taxes $300 on this plot of land? Maybe you inherited great grandpa and grandma's farmstead, whatever. Property taxes become an issue of that. They are a business expense though, right? Trademarks. If you have the best name, great logo and all this kind of stuff, you probably at least want to have that trademark at the South Dakota level. Probably if you're marketing on the internet, you might want to consider having it trademarked at the federal level. At the federal level, it's going to cost you between $3,000 and $5,000 more than likely. You probably need to hire an attorney unless you really want to spend some long, cold winter nights applying for a US trademark. Or maybe you have something patented, right? You know, it's like you have a patented container for your tomato sauce, right? Who was the one that came up with the squeeze tubes for tomato paste and ginger and all that kind of stuff? I don't know if that was patented or not, right? Copyrights. We are Small Business Development Center, and SD Business Help gets you to a number of these different places. And we do all sorts of things. We do training, QuickBooks and this type of stuff. Business plan. Okay. Where are we at for time?
11:23.
11:23. Well, we're right on time right here. We are. So your business plans, we talked about that a little bit, right? What I do is I send people the Word version. This is the PDF format, and it's pretty hard to manipulate. So I send them the Word version of this. And I can do the same thing for you as well too. And you can drop your cursor right in here. If I can find my mouse here. There he is. You can drop it right in here, and you can start typing away, you know, and you can say, okay, cover page. Okay, what's the cover page? Oh, it includes my address, my phone number, my business name, and all that kind of stuff. So that if you're taking this to a lender, I will tell you that most lenders, or if you're applying for a grant, they want all that information right there so they can do it. But more than likely, you're not going to sit right across the table from them or the desk like you used to and talk to that person that makes the decision on that. So I tell you everything as a lender about what I'm, and they're really excited about it, but now they have to take it to the committee, and they get 5 seconds, 5 minutes or whatever to explain this project. And a lot of it is based on just the numbers, right? I hate to say it, they're pretty objective about it. They're talking about the numbers. So have the good business plans, have the other things, but your business plan needs to tell the story so that somebody, and if SBA, you know, if you're dealing with SBA particular, it's maybe somebody 3 states away that will never ever see you, that will make a decision on whether you get a loan or not, right? So So I made a fictitious name, partially fictitious name. This is my operation out west. Valley View Farms, the address, which is actually not mine. But my name, my wife's name, my email and my phone number. So people can get a hold of me. If I'm going to the bank, I'm used to doing that. Table of contents, you might have those if you do need that. Executive summary. Now I put something in here for an executive summary, but as it says, overall what you want to accomplish. Write your business plan and then go back and do your executive summary. So it is the summary, the inclusion of everything about what you're trying to do. Okay, and I kind of jumped the gun here a little bit. Valley View Farms wants to intensify its offerings for wholesome, locally grown food products to the wholesale restaurant sector near Rapid City in the Black Hills area. The plan outlines financial needs of $38,000, revenue expectations to grow aggressively from $19,000. So I have objectively started doing those things that are going to be in the financial or the business plan, right? If you go to a lender, if you're saying, well, $19,000 and you show that to your spouse and they're going like, what do you mean? Where are we going to get, where are we going to get this money from? Right. So those are the things that you want to put in there, or the grant. It's like, well, I expect to get this grant of $14,000 or whatever it is. Those are the types of things. So your business, go back up here to executive summary. We're gonna cover that. But now the business. This is where it starts getting into the meat of it. And this is where I want you guys to start writing or on your keyboard. Just drop, and it can be fictitious as well, or it can be specifically for your business. Tell me what you just told me 15 minutes ago about what you're planning on doing. So you're going to articulate that for a paper copy, even if you just write it down, how your business is going to operate, right? What is your business going to be? Oh, I'm going to sell Belted Galloway cattle, meat, whatever. I'm going to sell tomato sauce, fresh tomatoes, pico de gallo, whatever it might be that Marty's going to do. I'm going to sell wine. I'm going to sell great homemade bread and flours or gluten-free. That's what you tell them. And you say, well, let's start looking at the numbers behind this as well. It's like, well, we'll talk about that a little bit more, but I want you to start putting this stuff down and say, and you can leave some, as I've done, you can leave some of those numbers out, right? Like, well, we're gonna get to those here in a little while, right? We're going to calculate it. We're going to do a sensitivity spreadsheet. You come to me, I'm big about sensitivity spreadsheets, and it's not a big deal, but you put it into a spreadsheet and you say, okay, takes me this many hours and these for the inputs, and I can change it all in the computer. And I can change, okay, if I expect to get $2 a pound for my tomatoes, okay, and I'm growing 1,500 pounds per year, or am I planning on getting 4,000 pounds per year? We can change each one of those elements, and it changes the bottom. Now, that will become really important. We can hook it into the rest of the spreadsheet and we can say the rest of that spreadsheet, how does that impact our income statement? How does that impact our expense picture, right? So, yeah. Maybe I'm pretty flowery there. Utilize rich agricultural lands. I don't know if they're real rich in western South Dakota at Sturgis, right? But we're calling it, I have the rich to me, right? And we're going to distribute those to the restaurants wholesale, right? We're not gonna do retail. We're not gonna do farmers markets. We're just gonna say restaurant customers, right? And I expect based on my conversations with those restaurants, that I'm gonna be able to sell this. Now, I will tell you, I've been at this for quite a while. I will tell you, it's like, if you have something perishable, oh yeah, I really want that. You can give me that kind of tomato or those kinds of peppers or whatever it might be. That's great. Till you come to them with those kind of tomatoes or peppers, and it's like, well, I already have enough tomatoes right now, so I'll give you 50 cents a pound for those, or I won't, come back next week. Well, next week, where are your tomatoes? They're in the garbage, right? So that, especially when you're dealing with specialty production, things like tomatoes, strawberries, apricots. They say the apricots are the most volatile fruit in the world, right? I don't know, apricots, it's like, yeah, okay. So you want to be careful of that when you talk to if you're talking to retailers as a wholesaler, is that that's what you're going to be up against. It's like it changes, the dynamics shift pretty dramatically. But I'm going to prove it to you. I'm going to be at the back door of your restaurant once a week. And you say you don't want them this week, but I'll have a new set harvested for next week. And you said you need 68 pounds of tomatoes. Here's the price. How many of them do you want? I'll be here next Monday. Okay. That's what you do. Or a contract, right? Contracts make it tough for them to back out of, but also make it tough for you to back out of. What happens if the hailstorm comes through and wrecks your high tunnel, right? And all the tomatoes go down the bugs, right?
Plants have 1,000 ways to die.
So I want you to take 10 minutes while I shut up for a little while and look at this and put down here how you're planning on doing this, even if it's not accurate. It's not, maybe you haven't thought a lot about this, but tell me. So did everybody get a chance to kind of put down some thoughts about what they're thinking about doing to make this business work, who they're going to sell to, organizational structure? We'll talk about that here in just a moment here before our last session, before lunch. I don't want to stand between you and lunch, but did we kind of figure out how our business is going to run, right? That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to figure out, and we're trying to explain it to even ourselves sometimes, because a lot of times we don't know. I think just in our conversations, it was like, well, this is explaining it to ourselves how we're going to make this, and we're putting it down on paper, because a lot of times our heads are full of ideas, right? But it's not until we start putting things down on paper that other people can see, whether it's a lender, whether it's a grant reviewer, or whether it's our spouse or our children. It's like, oh, you're expecting me to do what? You know, it's like, okay, yeah, that's what I'm expecting you to do, right? Management. This is can get into some pretty heavy stuff. It talks about some of the things that we were talking about before, but this is a good time to lay this stuff out. This is a good time to say, well, okay, we have quite a bit of property here that's worth a lot of value, but we don't want the operating, you know, if we're selling cantaloupe, right? Cantaloupe are highly volatile when it comes to like if you do things wrong with cantaloupe, but they're highly susceptible to a lot of foodborne illness because of their surface, right? That rough surface. It's like it's great for E. coli and breeding ground, right? And if you cut it, oh, I'm going to give you a sample. I'm going to cut it. Oh, okay. I just introduced all that stuff that's on the outside of that to the inside of that cantaloupe. And now I'm going to give you a sample, a free sample, right?
Wash it.
Did you wash it, right?
Wash the outside of them and that it introduces the bacteria. In them.
Sure. Water. Yeah, well, you know, just take it from this one that was really isolated to 600, right? That we put in the back of the pickup. Or did the back of the pickup, was it, we just all goats, you know, last week or whatever. So let me tell you just a brief little story. When I used to be at the winery, we used to buy a lot of grapes, right? And a lot of fruit, right? And we used to put them in what they called totes, right? They're fairly commonly, you know, in any place where you're producing grapes or fruit, big plastic deals, right? You know, and you pick them up with a forklift, you could turn them over, all that kind of stuff. It's like I knew, and I actually tested this. We had a little swabber, right? Anybody seen those? You swab across the surfaces here, maybe in multiple locations, and you stick it in this reagent. If it turns color or whatever, it's like, oh yeah. I realized that pretty soon that I wasn't going to be able to clean this good enough to make sure that that was clean. So what I did is I found online these great big garbage cans that fit, guess what? A tote, right? And they were pretty tall. They were like 6 or 8 foot tall, and they were kind of expensive. So, but every one of those, before we put grapes or fruit into it, we put that liner inside of those. Even after I washed them, sanitized them, which was probably a 2-day process to do a truckload and a semi-load of them. But anyway, so are you going to hire a CPA? Are you going to hire an attorney, right? Do I have business liability insurance? Anybody know what business liability insurance is? Especially for you that are in business, right? But those that you are not in business, those are all those things that property and casualty insurance won't touch, right? If your barn burns down, that's property and casualty. If your high tunnel blows over in a windstorm, that's property and casualty. But if somebody comes in, the dog that's normally really friendly bites somebody, just choose them and, you know, choose their ankles, right? Or if foodborne illness, all those things become liability to your operation. I tell everybody, you can't imagine what you might get sued for, or somebody says that you've harmed me, you can't imagine what that liability might look like. Saying, okay, we're 50-50 partners, okay, we're great. Maybe my wife is 51% partner, because she's a now a women-owned small business. Might make a difference somewhere down the line, including selling vegetables. If you're a veteran, you're Native American, all those things become important for that. And you want to explain that. You want to explain, it's like, well, if I'm Native American and I show up here and I say, well, I've got all this stuff here for you, some of my best purveyors for when I was buying fruits and vegetables for the winery were Native American. And it's like, if I wouldn't have been able to see past that, and there was all sorts of other issues that kind of went along with that. It's like, when I first started doing it, I was meeting him in the back alley. I was meeting him in the back alley, and I was carrying cash in downtown Rapid City. I was carrying cash, lots of cash. I said, oh, this doesn't work, right? So that's part of the culture, right? So that was one of the things that I had to deal with. I eventually got to switch fairly quickly over to, okay, here's a check. Well, I can't get this cash because I don't have, anyway. Develop the production and distribution guide in compliance with all the current state, local federations. That's a pretty broad statement. Like, but you've talked to all those people. You've talked to the Department of Health and Department of Public Safety and DANR, and you're selling meat, you're talking to AIB or USDA, or to your processor. It's like, oh yeah, you're good to go here to sell this, whatever, right? Plan on providing all the management, sales, logistical operation. In other words, I'm going to be doing the work. You know, in this particular business, I'm going to be doing the work. What's your business going to be like? Are you going to be doing the work? Are you going to hire that person to do the work? Is your family going to do that? What about on Saturdays, Sundays? What about the days that you want to take a vacation? What about off season? Right? So tell me now about how on your paper, on your computer, tell me how you're going to manage this for the next few minutes. And like I said, I don't want to stand in the way of lunch, but that's kind of what I'm doing here pretty closely. We're supposed to do lunch at 12:30. If we can get out a little bit earlier, that's great. You can, we'll talk a little bit more about lunch, but you have different options. We don't have lunch provided today here for us, unfortunately, but you can go, it's lunch on your own, restaurant. Maybe you brought brown bag, whatever. I'll be here this entire time to answer questions. So go ahead and either write or type in those items and how you expect that business run. Maybe you're going to be wholesale. Well, that's great. Okay. Or maybe I'm going to be all retail. You know, I'm going to set up a little farm side stand, right? Like Marty and his significant other are thinking about. It's like, okay, this is how we're going to do this, right? So now we start saying, okay, maybe we change that too. That's the great thing about that, about a business plan. You can change it and you can say, okay, but it's going to have impact on every other aspect of our business, right? So let's cover market just a little bit. marketing. I have a little bit different definition of marketing than a lot of people have. And it probably comes from my college professor many years ago. And it's probably pretty consistent with a lot of academic or textbook definitions of what marketing is. In the ag world, marketing is usually like, oh, are we gonna hedge, or are we gonna sell cash, or are we gonna forward contract, or whatever? How are we gonna market our product, right? How are we gonna, it's like, well, should you even be raising wheat or sheep or goats or whatever? It's like, what's the product? What's the price? What's the placement? In other words, where are you going to take it to? What's the fourth P? Product, price, place, placement. What?
Plan.
No, it's not plan. Product, price, placement. Now I'm lost. I'll think about it here in a moment. The four P's of marketing, right? Distribution. That's part of placement, right? But you have to think that if you have tomatoes that are a perishable product, how are you going to deliver those? Well, you're probably not going to entrust them to somebody throwing them on the truck, and you're not going to have Speedy pick them up or not pick them up or whatever, and then deliver them to Rapid City, and they drop them off at a central location. You're probably going to deliver them yourself. You're going to buy a delivery van. So your market includes all this. Now, I said in my hypothetical situation, I'm going to deliver to the restaurants. So is my pickup or is my minivan, is that a good thing to deliver tomatoes with? Yeah, it's a good place to start out with, right? I'm going to deliver tomatoes 3 times a week or whatever. And we're going to talk to each one of those restaurants, the restaurant owners, managers, chefs, whoever they are. And we're going to, based on that, whether it's a contract, a handshake, well, that's a tough one. I'm sure that the people that have been in this business know how sensitive those, well, it's like, well, yeah, I talked to Joe last, back in October, and he said, well, we're ready for tomatoes, right? Anytime you want to bring them over. Yeah, Joe isn't with us anymore, right? So that's the reality of that, especially when you're dealing with food service. But same way with, it's like, oh, I have a big contract with the hospital or Black Hills Corporation or the state of South Dakota, or I deliver meals, fresh meals to the prison system here in Hughes County, right? Whatever it might be. So,
Promotion.
promotion. So what is your promotion? There we go. Very good. I like that. I like your thinking, right? Promotion, right? If I'm at the farmer's market, what promotes me, right?
Word of mouth.
Word of mouth. That's a good way. It's really cheap generally, right? What?
Facebook.
Facebook, social media. I generally tend to lump all that social media, but is it Twitter? Is it Facebook? The other day somebody said, well, Facebook is so outdated. Well, probably not here in pure South Dakota, maybe not in your community, right? It's the,
My market.
yeah, not here, in my market, right? Yeah,
I read it on MySpace.
yeah. But whether it's, and I think you have to kind of keep up with that. Are the old what used to be tried and true, it's like, well, you could put advertisements in the newspaper. Well, who reads the newspapers anymore? Probably nobody under 50 reads a newspaper anymore. I hate to say, maybe they do, maybe they pick up one occasionally. What about ads on the radio? Who listens to the radio? Who listens to Pandora. You ever heard any local ads on Pandora? Have you listened to Pandora? What's the other one? Spotify, right?
YouTube,
YouTube?
yeah, YouTube Premium, they'll put local ads.
Local ads, right? And how much do those cost you? What about direct mail? You have flyers sent to, do you buy the list from the post office and send people a nicely done postcard and have it all printed up and say, oh yeah, we got these great, maybe it's in the shape of a tomato and, you're saying, okay, well, here's my tomato. Yeah, that's can be pretty expensive. And it's like, okay, so now we're starting to see how this, this is what I'm planning on doing in order to sell 38,000 pounds of tomatoes this next year. Okay, that's pretty aggressive, but, oh, okay, well, we're gonna do this and we're gonna do that and do, however, if I'm just gonna go to, it's like, well, I'm gonna go out and visit each one. It's kind of word of mouth and, maybe I take them some salsa and we sit there and eat some chips and it's like, aren't these great? It's like, these are good tomatoes and they're grown in the ground and they're better than anything you get because guess what? They were, I didn't pick them until they were red, right? Whereas the stuff you get off the truck, it was picked 3 weeks ago and it was greener than an apple. But I don't mean to run down tomatoes off the truck, but I do. So, market. And after dinner, we're going to talk more about money. Because this is the culmination of we're bringing everything together. Are you going to rob the piggy bank? Are you looking for grant funding for doing this? You going to go to a lender? Or is it going to be a portion of like we talked about before there? And we talked about it here a little bit here, just in this scenario here, it's like needing $38,000 of outside financing. What do you think a bank will go? Well, maybe if they have a good plan in front of them. I will tell you, I'll expose my underside a little bit here. Maybe you call me the dragon, right? Years ago, and I think this is probably pretty prevalent out in the agricultural community. It's like the bank wouldn't let me do this, right? The bank wouldn't give me money to do this. So they wouldn't, the bank cut me off or they said, you can only have this much. It's my job as a business owner to come in and give that loan officer a proposal that says, here's how I'm going to make money. Here's how I'm going to do this. Or take it to my spouse or take it to my kids or my business partners and say, here's how we're going to do this. And whether they believe you or not, that's another. But I think is that the business plan gives you the opportunity to make that case. And hopefully, now think about this as you're writing the business plan, is that business plan convincing to whoever's reading that? Whether it be a lender, grant reviewer, your spouse, your children, whoever, even yourself, is it convincing to you? It's like, I can make money this way. Or you can say, well, this says I need $38,000 outside financing. And maybe the first bank I go to, but no, we're full up on that. So I go to the next bank. No, we're full up on that. Thanks, but no thanks. Third bank we go to, or credit union we go to, it's like, maybe you have something. Let me see your numbers. Okay. Well, not quite sure. The debt coverage ratio, we'll talk about that just a little bit here in the afternoon, but it doesn't fit their model, their numbers for doing a business, right? So, what time are we? We're at lunchtime, right? So as you eat lunch, and think about why you eat lunch, where you do, you were marketed to, all those elements come together. Like the advertisement, the brand, maybe it's proximity, right? It's like, oh yeah, I can tell you, yeah, there's one right down here. There's a whole strip of fast food here, and there's Mexican across the street, 4 blocks, and there's barbecue down here, 3 blocks, and whatever. All those things contribute to what you're going to eat for lunch today, right? How that was marketed, poorly or maybe not. It's like you get to the restaurant, oh, this is a great experience, and they get there and the service is terrible, or the prices are outrageous, or whatever. That's all together your marketing. Or you talk about market, right? What is your market, right? Well, market for a restaurant here in Pierre is people that come through that are at workshops, people that are residents, people that are legislators.
Fishermen.
What?
Fishermen.
Yeah, fishermen are hunters, right? So, everybody good? Think about it. Be back here at 1:30, I think is what our deal says. Try to make it back by 1:30 and we will continue on. We will all give you an insight into our spreadsheet. We'll talk about that a little bit more. And we'll talk about some of the worksheets that we still want to do that are more financial, that we have to put numbers down to, right? Okay. Any questions, anybody? Yes.
Are you willing to take a look at some of the things that we have? so
Absolutely.
far?
Absolutely. If you this afternoon or, anytime. And by the way, and that's why I put out my cards there for everybody as well too. I'm available to any of you, or if there's somebody that's in your local market, get a hold of my colleagues. They have a different concept. I know especially crops fairly well because I've been working with them a lot. I know a lot of small producers like this, but they're not a lot different than a lot of the other producers and stuff like that, or a lot of the other businesses as well too. So money.
Okay, that should be.
What is it? Pardon me?
Oh, time and money there.
Time and money. Yeah, time and money. Yeah, it's like if you don't have time, you can, if you don't have time, but you have a lot of money, you can buy time, right? Supposedly. Or if you don't have money, you have probably a lot of time, so you can make money. That was, anyway,
In an ideal world.
in an ideal world, right? So these are guesstimates. And like, how do we know how much revenue we're gonna have? And I deal with this with every business that I deal with. Like, how do we know how much we can make, how much of what our gross revenues are gonna be, or even what our net income is gonna be? Well, the net income is usually, we can figure that out once we kind of know what the gross revenues are. And it took me a little while to kind of figure this out, but it was kind of like with professional people. I from time to time, I deal with professional people that come in that have like a clinic or a practice or something like that. It's like, okay, there's so many hours in a day. And you're billing out your hours, right? So how many hours can you see patients, right? Well, that's a good way of just like, well, there's, do you want to work 20 hours a day, or no, I want to work 10 hours every day. That's my wife said she's going to leave me if I work more than 10 hours a day, right? So I say, well, okay, 10 hours a day. What are going to be your rates? What are your rates for chiropractic or veterinarian or whatever it might be? Those service deals. Let's break that down. Let's put that in a sensitivity spreadsheet and say, okay, If I charge $120 an hour, I can earn this much. If I charge $180, I can earn this much. Now let's put that in. Let's look at the expenses because we have very similar to the expenses that go along with that. And the big thing that that I have preached for years, and I think it can be kind of a fairly simple concept, but it's one that we tend to ignore so many times when we start businesses. And the academics call this asset utilization. Okay. I used to call it fixed cost dilution when I was in the classroom before. So for the agriculturalists, which at some level, maybe you are all considered agriculturalists, right? Think about it as if you bought a new tractor, right? Or you go out and bought a tractor, right? And the tractor cost you $50,000. And you use that tractor for 1 hour during the year. Okay, so now you have your payment to make or whatever. You put it in the shed, so much square footage in the shed. And this goes back 45 years, right, to farm economics for me. It's like the divvy 5, right? Depreciation, interest, repairs, taxes, and insurance, right? So, well, all those things, all those fixed costs that you're going to pay or that are going to accumulate to that fixed asset, that tractor, divided by 1. Well, let's say it's $5,000 divided by 1. So our fixed costs per unit are $5,000 per unit. That's pretty healthy. Now, if we use that tractor for 1,000 hours, like maybe it was designed to do, what are our fixed costs per unit? Oh, they're $5 per hour. Well, let's see. What do I want to do? Do I want to spend $1,000 an hour? Or do I want to spend, or $5,000 an hour? Or do I want to spend $5 an hour? That's usually the key for a lot of these businesses. Now, variable costs are, it's like it's your fuel, it's the operator and all those kind of things. That's going to, that's going to vary. We're going to figure that out. But fixed cost, and we have a break-even analysis coming up here too. But you'll say, well, boy, it'd be really nice if I was doing all this to have all this equipment, but I'm only going to do 50 pounds. Wineries are a good example, right? It's like, what does it take to make a winery go, right? It takes a lot of equipment and, the marketing and all those become all fixed costs and it's per unit. So let's say we have $12 a bottle in fixed costs, or maybe it's even more than that, because we have all this equipment. But if we start out just real reasonably and say, oh, I got a hand machine and I do everything in a big vat and I used they're pretty much extinct now, but they're the big stainless steel milk coolers that they get off the dairies. And that's what you'd make wine in. There was a lot of wineries that started that way, right? They were stainless steel, they were food grade, all this kind of stuff. And they picked them up for little of nothing because those dairies are gone, right? So the wineries picked these up and it's like, okay, well, now we've got a winery. Now my fixed cost per bottle is only $2 per bottle because I'm doing 1,000 bottles of wine from my grapes. So now my fixed costs are much less, right? Same way with what other operations do you have? I think generally, I think when we talk about Bearview Gardens, or we talk about the, pardon me if you don't mind me using this, but if we talk about about commercial kitchens or doing your own processing, how much are you processing through there? Are you using that 2 hours a year, 2 hours a month, 2 hours a week? Maybe the same thing with a high tunnel, right? That high tunnel, it does great. It has a great value to us for 6 months of the year. But then the other 6 months, it sits there. And we try to keep it.
A stupid question here.
No, not a stupid question.
But you said, okay, I use tractor, now you have the commercial kitchen.
Right?
Is there like a cheat sheet on that? How you determine that? Like,
No, but that's, it's per your figures, right? It's like, well, how much is
whatever you
the-
paid for it,
whatever you paid for it, that's part of it. But then, and it's not necessarily what you paid for it, but it's what we depreciate out per year,
per
right?
year.
Or we
Depreciation.
expected the high tunnel, the $10,000 high tunnel to last 5 years, so $2,000 a year. Well, what's it gonna be worth? Well, it's not completely worthless. So we're only depreciating out maybe $5,000 over the 5 years. So now it's only $1,000 a year. We're gonna recover it. All the pipe works and the irrigation.
What you're saying is if we can somehow find some way to get an extra 2 months of use that generate income out of that to spread out, that's your fixed cost dilution.
That's your your asset utilization, right? Whether it's a tractor, whether it's a pickup, whether it's a high tunnel, whether it's a steam kettle, packaging machine, whatever it might be. All those become part of what we consider fixed cost. Now, very, very similar, and there's this, right? So high here, we have a high variable cost. And if you started your winery and you had almost no cost, you went out and got, Uncle Pete's milk tank and you do everything like this, and okay, your fixed costs are very low, right? Or vice versa. It's like, boy, I can do this all with 2 people and I can produce 20,000 bottles of wine. My fixed costs are really high here, but my variable costs are really low, right? So that's good. Usually they tend to balance out. But where's the risk? It's this one over here with the high fixed cost where there's a lot of risk because you pay that no matter what, right? You still have to make that tractor payment. You still have to pay the insurance. You still have to suffer the depreciation or whatever, the interest, doing all those things. You still have to pay that whether you use it for 1 hour or whether you use it for 1,000 hours. So we'll start talking about that a little bit more, and we'll see that in the break-even analysis. So okay. The business plan, again, I think we kind of have that, at least you have the background down for doing a business plan. Business plans can be as complex as you want them, or they can be as simple as you want.